All right, so today we are looking at a paint by numbers painting that I recently picked up from Goodwill. And this one is called Maple Syrup Harvest, I think is what I found online. Once again, it's kind of hard to find some information on some of these older paint by numbers, but what Google came up with when I did a Google Lens on this was that it was paint by numbers somewhere between 55 and 73, I think it said, 1955 to 1973, and it was maple syrup harvest. And this one was really well done. I found it at the local Goodwill of all places, and it is really well done. I'm surprised at how well the artist did with all of the colors. They are, sorry, the sunlight's glaring off of this acrylic paint. The colors are very crisp, and the lines are very sharp, and got me to thinking about this style of painting. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think this one's going to stay in our collection. I got it for $3.99, which is pretty amazing. To be honest, it came with this frame. I do suspect, and this is just speculation, I do suspect that the turquoise or blue-green or whatever color on the frame was actually added later. I think the frame was just simply gold to begin with, and it looks like maybe they painted that turquoise on after the fact, maybe in later years. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that it doesn't seem that painting frames was a very common practice in the mid-century, mid-19th century. So I don't know that that's actually the case, but I would suspect it was probably just this solid gold originally, and then somebody later in years painted it with this kind of wash to make it look more like the painting, and match a little bit better, not be so harsh. The frame is, I think, original and as old as the painting. This is actually one of their cardboard versions. So there's the cardboard back there. So this is like an authentic and original. I don't know if, this is the original frame it was mounted in. I don't know, but it is interesting. Looks really good, and the frame is old as well. So I don't know, when that all occurred. But either way, the painting is pretty cool. You can see a little bit of the texture of the canvas material on the cardboard. You can also see just the crisp acrylic lines in it. And what it got me thinking about is why there's such a fascination with paint by numbers, especially the vintage ones. So I have a 1990s-ish paint by numbers that I'm going to be doing here soon. And of course, the box is not very appealing and whatever. But also, I've noticed that the characters and things like that one's of a beach scene and whatnot. But the characters in these older ones are different. As time went on, paint by numbers continued to kind of modernize, and you can actually still buy paint by numbers today if you wanted brand new off of Amazon. And they aren't these old scenes. I don't think you can get these any longer. But you can still buy some paint by numbers and do those if you like. I think that personally, just out of speculation and having been around vintage stuff for a long time, I think one of the things that really makes paint by numbers painting so intriguing and actually sought after, because there's a group of people that collect these things. They buy them, and they only want the paint by numbers that are already painted. And I think a lot of that's because of the way that paint by numbers are designed. For instance, there's no, they don't teach you to blend color, right? So you're not dabbing color and washing color and blending color in between these. What you're doing is it's more vector-ish. So if it was like created in a vector program in modern terms, these tones and these shadows and these shades are very hard lined edged, and they're different colors, but they're very hard lined. They're not faded, they're not blurred. And even though this is a traditional scene of them using horses and a sled wagon, as well as being dressed in a more traditionally old-fashioned way, the fact that it's so hard edged makes it more modern in its appearance. And I really believe that's one of the things that really made these paintings so appealing to people, because they, were like this very clean edge, modern look with very traditional aspects to them. Another thing that makes them valuable today, because my wife was asking me why paint by numbers? Why would they be valuable? And that's really a good question, because these things were cheap. Like back in the day, they were relatively cheap. They were somewhat abundant, not by any means abundant compared to the standards of today's mass production, but they were mass produced. They were fairly abundant. And the thing was, though, this was a beginner's paint concept. Like if you thought you might be into painting, or if you thought you might want to start being an artist, then you bought a paint by numbers. It gave you the numbers. I'm going to show you guys with the one that I have later in another video what paint by numbers really look like and how they work, because I don't think a lot of people understand. I found some people know the term and know the concept, but don't really understand how they fully work. So I'll show you that. But so it gave you how to paint this, and it created very defined lines. And people painted these, and they hung them on their wall maybe if they were good enough for a little bit. But this was like the beginner. It's almost like the adult version of children's art, right? So eventually what usually happened is they got thrown out because they weren't very good. If somebody didn't keep doing art, then maybe they just eventually swapped out the art for more modern art as the decades went on, or maybe they just threw it out because they thought it was bad, or as somebody did do these and then became a better artist, this would have been considered to a large degree like a very inferior piece of art. So they ended up trashing them as being throwaway art, which unfortunately means that they're kind of hard to come by. Not impossible by any means, as you can see here, but kind of hard to come by. And so I have an aunt as well. It's actually my wife's aunt, but we love her dearly, and we love vintage things, and she loves paint by numbers and has them collecting on her wall. And that's where I actually got my paint by number from, that I'm going to be doing for you guys. And so when I saw this one, I just had to get it. $3.99 with the frame at Goodwill. So don't forget to check out the art section and home decor section at Goodwill. You never know what you're going to find. Like I said, this one's going to stay with us. Even though we have a more modern home, I do think that this one will fit, and I think you're going to see how we put it into the interior once I get the interior of our home done. And yeah, hope you like it. Thanks for stopping by. See you in the next one. Bye.